everyone, my name is Josh and this one's called Interesting Musings, and today I've got a book review for you on Troubled Blood by Robert Galbraith. Now this book is quite a big book, so the fact that I was able to read this, I actually got this book during lockdown, so I was actually very worried about reading this book because of the whole J.K. Rowling being accused of transphobia and people saying that, it's transphobic and all these other things. It made me want to step away from the series fully. But then because if I hadn't, if my birthday, if no one had gotten this for me as a gift on my birthday, I probably wouldn't have even read this book, and I probably would have been like everybody else, like, oh, is J.K. Rowling transphobic? And if I, read any books of hers, am I, fueling, that negativity and that bigotry? So yeah, I actually kind of found myself, I'm not going to read this. But then during my birthday, it was during lockdown 2020, and it was in November, so it was that brief window where we could all, come out and we could all, greet each other and, hug each other and, have, these smallish get-togethers. I think there was only about 3 people in the room with me when I was opening my presents. And one of the books that I got, in a previous video, I said it was Faceless by Martina Cole. And I got this book as well as the Ichabog by J.K. Rowling. And I was very happy because it happened to be the book that I was waiting to read, or if I could read it, should I read it, kind of thing. And I'm actually quite glad that I did, because this book got me through lockdown. And like I said, it's 900 pages long. And a lot of the reviews, especially a lot of the negative reviews for this book, have often cited this book as being just too long. So I found myself going, bitch please, I read Stephen King. So I basically looked at this, I rolled up my sleeves and I said, hold my beer. And I dived straight into this book and I have never looked back. So honestly, I absolutely love this book. This was such a compelling read, and I found myself thinking, in regards to the controversy of whether or not it's transphobic, I said to myself, really? Is this the book that people are all angry about and all, upset about J.K. Rowling for writing? And when I actually did my research for it, I actually understood why, because there was one review that said, the moral of this story is never trust a man in a dress. And I'm actually going to hit that nail on the head right away. I'm going to say that this book is not transphobic, because the killer in question, his name's Dennis Creed, is a man who, when he stalks his victims, he basically, his peak timeline was the 70s, and this was around the time in which the main character goes missing. So the whole entire story is basically Cormoran Strike is approached by the daughter of a general practitioner named Margot Bamborough with the task of basically finding her. She disappeared in 1974. She left her practice at 9 p.m. and she was meant to have a very short walk from the practice to the pub where she was meant to meet her friend for drinks, but she never showed up. So the whole entire point is, can Cormoran Strike figure out what happened to her between her leaving the practice and her not showing up for the drinks, and what happened to her when she disappeared? So him and Robin basically go on this investigation, and among the few people who basically are listed as suspects is the father of a massive drug ring, a massive ring of underground criminals, kind of East End gangster kind of thing. And one of the suspects is also a man named Dennis Creed, who stalked his prey wearing a woman's coat and a wig. So to me, I don't think it's transphobic. I just think he's just a guy who couldn't commit to the idea of fooling people into thinking that he was a woman, when in fact, he isn't. He's basically just a man, essentially. And he has an entire backstory which hints at the fact that he keeps women's items as various motifs, like Jerry Brudos, a real-life American serial killer, who kept women's undergarments and high heels and things like that. That entire episode of Mindhunter is very chilling. But it's a very good watch. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend watching Mindhunter. It's on Netflix. It's a Netflix original series. But if you're interested in true crime, I'd definitely recommend giving that show a watch. But yes, this particular book is very compelling, but I just don't think it's as transphobic as people say, or it's not transphobic full stop. I don't think it is, but a lot of people might enlighten me in the comments and tell me what basically the general problem was. But I personally, I'm holding the ground. I don't think this is as bad as people say. And to move on to the plot, it's basically going back to Cormoran and Robin. They are investigating a cold case of Margot Bamborough, who went missing in 1974, and they have a whole entire host of suspects, and they go on an investigation. What this book talks about, because the entire theme with the Cornwall Strike series is they go into a particular type of industry that a lot of us might know about on surface level, but we don't know much about it outside of the fact that we go to certain places to get stuff, or we might go to certain industries, or we might find out about certain industries through other mediums. But in this book, in the first book, it was about the fashion industry. In the second book, it was about the publishing industry. In the third book, it was about the military. In the fourth book, it was about the House of Parliament and politics, street politics, and parliamentary politics, and all the stuff that goes in between it. This one tackles the medical industry, and more specifically, the goings-on that goes on behind the doors of general practitioners and general practices in any local area. And this particular book really does shine a light into a lot of the things that you might not want to know about if you're going for a checkup with your local GP, because honestly, that sort of thing will definitely get you in the papers, and you'll probably lose your license if that information ever came to light, or if you're wrongly accused of something. So there's a lot of storytelling behind it. But what I really like about this book is it genuinely is very gripping. I found myself really desperately trying to turn the pages and try to figure out what's going on. It gave us a lot more insight into Robin and Cormoran Strike's relationship with each other. I like the use of music in this one. I like the use of Joni Mitchell as a constant motif in this book, because I recently watched a YouTuber who reacts to songs, and me and him basically, had a little bit of a teary-eyed moment when I was watching his video, and I actually got teary-eyed during one song of Joni Mitchell's, and I found myself, thinking, wow, this singer's quite, quite the singer and quite the songwriter, and I found myself, really enjoying the music of Joni Mitchell through this book. So thank you, J.K. Rowling, for giving me, a window into reviewing and looking at another, music icon. So yeah, thank you, J.K. Rowling. But this book was really compelling. Cormoran Strike is struggling with his going up and down Cornwall to visit his aunt Joan, who raised him and Lucy after Leda basically abandoned them to become a groupie of Johnny Rokeby. And Johnny Rokeby is alleged to be the biological father of Cormoran Strike. And here's the thing with John Rokeby. He is a piece of, pardon my language, he's a piece of shit. I hate John Rokeby, and the guy who plays him in the television series is equally as cringeworthy. Whenever I see the guy, I just want to punch him in the face, because honestly, he is a terrible, terrible, terrible person. He could have potentially been responsible for Leda's death, but yet he completely and utterly washes his hands of her, and he even goes so far as to judge her for basically coming on to him and being inappropriate with him, when in reality he had no real issues with women coming up to him and forcing themselves on him when he was in his heyday, when he was, the big rocker of the day. And I just found myself thinking, you are a piece of trash. And I absolutely hate John Rokeby, and I hate him even more when Cormoran Strike gets famous, and now he can't get in touch with him anymore, because he knows he's famous now, and he's like, oh, I want to have a family reunion, and I feel like I should mend a few bridges and get to know you a little bit more. And I thought, no, mate, if I was Cormoran Strike, I'd be no, F off you. Like, seriously, why are you all of a sudden wanting to come back into my life now? Is it because I'm famous? Like, what's the story there? And I really hate John Rokeby so much. He's awful. But yeah, we get a lot of insight into his backstory, his relationship with this rocker character, but we also get a lot of insight into his relationship with Joan and what a nice person she was. And it was just a heartbreaking. Those entire chapters where it was him going to Cornwall was really heartbreaking for me, because seeing this person who clearly was a very huge influence on his life and basically sort of, embedded the construct of morality that he got, through his detective work, that he later used in his detective work, through this woman, and how much of a huge insight she had in his life and how much of a huge impression she had in his life, was such a fantastic piece of writing from J.K. Rowling's perspective. And I just really think there's a lot of passages in this that are really moving, especially when it comes to their Aunt Joan, and it really is just heartbreaking to see Cormoran basically go through his period where he's essentially saying goodbye to a second mother, someone who basically, really was really there for him when his real mum couldn't be, or when she was so high on drugs, or when she was so lost in the romance of being a groupie, she basically, forgot her children. But she did love Cormoran, I feel like, and she didn't feel like she had any real entitlement because she gave birth to Cormoran. She felt like she had rights to say where he went, who he went with, and all these other things. But I like the fact that there is that element that she still loved Cormoran, even though she technically abandoned him. But that's what I like about J.K. Rowling's characterization and how she writes characters. Is it's not all cut and dry. You don't really get the sense of, oh, this person's a piece of shit, or this person's, a bad person. As the series goes on, you really do find out that, oh, these people aren't as bad as you would think they are. And that's apparently going to happen with Charlotte, because there's a lot of things in this book that do give a lot of insight into her relationship. Yes, she's still, slightly troubled, and she does seem to be gunning for Cormoran to get back together with her. But you do really feel like a sense of vulnerability. Like, she does feel a sense of regret having, left Cormoran. Whether it's actually because he's famous or whether it's because she genuinely loved him remains to be seen. I'll have to read the follow-up book, The Ink Black Heart, to really get the full story on that. But what I think is very interesting is all these characters really do get a lot of interesting things to do. Like, say, for example, Robin is struggling through a divorce, and she's constantly being harassed by a contractor known as Morris. And he is basically the type of guy that if you were to meet him personally, and if he were to basically, try the moves on you, if you were to tell him no, he wouldn't stop there. He would continuously keep harassing you. He'll, pry for information about your personal life. And there's even one incident during Christmas, because this takes place during December, where she's at home with her family in Yorkshire, and she basically wants to find notes. She forwards notes on a case, a different case. I think that they call it the Tufty case because of surveillance or something. And he sends her a dick pic while he's drunk, by the way. And I kind of found myself thinking, if someone did that to me and I didn't ask for it, I'd be like, I'm blocking you right off the bat. The fact that she literally gave him the room to breathe and say, you know what, I could very easily get you fired and tell Cormoran Strike that you did this to me, sexual harassment, but I'm not going to, because I'm just going to give you a telling right now. You better send me a picture of something very important the next time you send a picture of anything, because honestly, this is unacceptable. I literally thought to myself during that moment, she's a lot nicer than I would have been, because honestly, I'd have been like, I'm just blocking you right off the bat, because that's what I'd be like. But yeah, I just kind of think to myself, yeah, it's not warranted, and I just think to myself, please read the room and know when someone's actually, not interested, because that sort of thing isn't very acceptable. So yeah, I really do kind of think that this arc for Robin is very interesting. J.K. Rowling did say also that this particular book is one of its main themes is the changing nature of feminism, and the idea that Robin basically feels like she's getting older, she's approaching 30, and she's starting to contemplate the idea of whether or not she'd want to have children, because the people around her are starting to have babies. And that's a very interesting dynamic, and even people are pressuring her and Cormoran Strike to get together. And I don't think they should yet, because even though they have gone through their fair share of trauma, and people like to think, oh, that's a very cute idea, like have these two people have very messed up childhoods, or very messed up upbringings, or very messed up pasts together, they can heal together, right? No, that's usually a surefire sign that things are not going to last when you are in a relationship, because more often than not, it lasts even being generous, a few months. It doesn't usually last that long, and if they're lucky to come out alive and still remain friends, it's still going to be very difficult for them to mend that relationship. So I don't think Cormoran and Robin need to develop a relationship yet. They're still good as friends. But if they do decide to go there, I think they really need to take a lot of precautions in order to do that. They need to actually go through therapy together, or go through therapy separately, and really, discuss their issues in the open and figure out how they're going to manage themselves. Because Cormoran Strike is messy, and even he says at one point during this book, the reason why I'm not going to go anywhere near this is I'm probably going to F it up. And that's something that I really do like about Cormoran, is he's aware of himself enough to know when his shortcomings are front and center in his mind. Like, he knows that he's a screw up. He knows that he has issues in regards to the social scene. He's had various different relationships that have gone down the toilet throughout the past 4 books. So we know that he isn't a really reliable person when it comes to relationships. And trying to couple that with his work at the detective agency is just going to add more fuel to the fire. So I feel like that's one of the things that I really do appreciate with this particular book, is that they really go into they readdress the important questions, that what would happen if the two of these characters would get together. And I really do find that quite, compelling. But the mystery itself is still very compelling. I like the idea that it's a cold case this time round, a case that's, never been solved. And I like how they approached it. I like the fact that they talked about the medical industry, which is an industry that really is quite, important to talk about. And it's probably an industry that a lot of people probably don't want to go into in terms of, crime story, because often you go to these private practices to seek help from your doctor, and you don't want to find out anything horrible about, doctors in these sort of fictional stories, because you do start to raise a few eyebrows and wonder, how is my doctor thing behaving today, or how are they feeling today, kind of thing. So it really kind of creates a whole entire can of worms. But I really do like the fact that it's a very compelling mystery. There's a lot of characters, but it doesn't feel like it's information overload. I always try to keep track of who the characters are, and I always try to keep track of what they were involved in and what their duties were. Even if I have to keep notes on my Chromebook or on a notebook, I will happily go through those measures. And I think this book is much more easier to follow than I think the Ink Black Heart is, because even though I am enjoying the Ink Black Heart, I have a lot to say about it when I eventually get round to it. I am going to leave a little bit of a gap between this book review and my review for the Ink Black Heart, because I want to basically have it converge just in time for when the Running Grave comes out. So I am building towards that release. But I really enjoyed this book. This was a really good time, and I really loved the mystery, and I even loved the television adaptation that they released a year or so ago, featuring Tom Burke and Holiday Granger as the returning detective duo of Robin and Cormoran. And it's a 5-star read for me. And this has been Joshua WHIMS Corn Interesting Musings. Let me know what you thought of this book down in the comments. Did you like it? And if you haven't read it, do you want to read it now? Do you want to check out this series overall? And I just want to know, what was your thought? What were your thoughts on the Cormoran Strike series? If you've seen it, have you seen it without reading the books? And if so, what did you think of the series? Not having read the books and not being aware of the source material, what did you think of the entire series? Did you think it was good, or did you think there was stuff to be desired? What did you think? Let me know. Be sure to let me know in the comments. And this has been Joshua WHIMS Corn Interesting Musings, and take care. Bye-bye for now.